So my name is Najoh, and it's a pleasure to be here. I was just thinking about how amazing it is to be in a room of people with such shared values, to be able to be in a room where the example and definition of leadership is so similar among so many of us, because many of us learn leadership at P&G, and how rare that is in the world. We all have such similar experiences from P&G. We also have shared experiences on what our life has been like after P&G. And so it's an honor to be able to talk today about leadership, something that we all share. Of course, I won't be teaching leadership because we all know leadership. We are extraordinary leaders in this room, and we have to thank our life experiences for that. But I do want to spend some time talking about what many of us have either relearned or must relearn in order to drive exponential leadership. And so I'll share a few examples. Before I do that, I want to just see how similar we might be. So if I do a little call and response to see if you guys can finish these sentences. Let's see, at P&G, managers provide solutions, not problems, okay. Feedback is a all right, okay, we're good. So I'm in the right room. And I'd be surprised, actually, if I use feedback as a gift. I thought everyone had heard that quote. Do you know that actually most people have never actually heard that quote, and many leaders actually don't believe it. I learned that trying to get feedback. But I will say today is an opportunity for us to pause and really think about how we lead, give ourselves some feedback, and really be honest about, are we really doing the right things as leaders to drive innovation? Are we doing the same exact things that we've always done to drive potential incremental leadership or sustainable leadership, which is important. But there are different types of leadership for different types of output. So first, I wanted to be able to share, I'm going to share 10 things, and there'll be no more words, and please don't try to write this down. But the 10 things I'm going to share are really about some principles around what we must relearn. These things are things that I've personally experienced, and they're also based on some of the learnings that I really believe P&G has experienced recently that has led to some of the great growth. And so I wanted to try to at least tie into my own personal experience as a leader, but also some of the experiences on what P&G has relearned to deliver what I think is a really great era for the future of the company that we so love. So the first one is around working outside in. And we all know, of course, how important it is for us to be experts of our business. In fact, for those of you that might have been brand managers at P&G, you know that many of us were taught that we must know everything about our brand. And we actually tried to learn everything about our brand. And at some point, actually, many of us believed we knew everything about our brand. That is the most dangerous thing you could possibly do to drive innovation, is to actually think you know everything. The reality is, many of the leaders today actually think they do know everything. Many leaders today really don't work outside in. They believe they know their business, they're experts in their category, they know their markets, they know the size of prize for things before you even talk to them, which is probably got them the job, but it will not drive innovation. I happen to work as a global chief marketing officer, and as part of that role, I have innovation and R&D, and baby food is one of the brands that I have the pleasure of working on. Within baby food, I happen to work and have worked for a company that many people believe they invented or helped invent the category. They're 1 and 2 in many of their markets. People will say that it was, them or their fathers or their grandfathers that actually the first to help invent baby food in jars. So to tell somebody anything about baby food when you have a company that thinks they know everything about baby food is pretty impossible. Now, we all know baby food hasn't really revolutionized that much in the past, thousands of years. And when I think about how was I going to drive innovation in baby food, I'm like, oh my God, this is a really hard category to innovate short of pouches. I went and talked to some of the great leaders, experts in nutrition and baby food, and they basically said, we are experts, we know the market, it's never going to really change. Every time you bring up an idea, we've been there, we've done that, we've tried it. And so I said, well, have you ever actually gone out and tried to solve a problem with baby food, or are we just trying to figure out how to not lose market share for baby food? And so no, the problem is very clear. We're losing market share to a bunch of niche baby care products, moms who are making, baby food in their home. And we will either continue to dominate because we are cost efficient, we have better products, we have better ingredients. And if one of those small niche companies happens to grow big enough, we'll just buy them. Okay, so that's really not an innovative environment at all. So we said, okay, well, what's the challenge? And the challenge, of course, is that within baby food, we're looking at a total addressable market, which many of us have mastered. You look at a total addressable market, you know how big the category is, and you work to get the biggest size of a prize. We were not looking at a total addressable problem, which some of you are very familiar with. But others, you still might say a total addressable market is all you need to focus on. If you're only dealing with a total addressable market, then your pie is only ever going to be so big. We had to look and say, what is the problem that we actually are trying to solve, which is bigger than just how do you not lose market share on baby food. It has to do with what is the problem of being able to address a need. And you can look at the problem many different ways. I can't really give the company secrets away, but you could do something as funny as how do you feed people with no teeth. You could do something of a problem of how do you be able to drive nutrition among a certain way, in a convenient way, be sustainable, organic, and do local farming. Any of these problems are very different than looking at the market today of baby food. We took people out and changed the mindset of a total addressable market to what a total addressable problem was for baby food. We came up with more innovations than the company has ever had. It really changed the framework for the company, and the pipeline for what we'll do within baby food is tremendous. And I would say that it is just a difference of taking those same experts that knew way more than I would ever know about baby food and having them start with the outside in, working with consumers and thinking about a problem and not just the current market as it is. So the first thing I'd say is to make sure that you challenge your team as leaders to think about a big addressable problem and not just the market that you've always worked to serve. The second example is really one that I think we're all very familiar with, and that has to do with the way that we do research. There are some of the world's best experts of research also in this room. We've all learned voice of the customer or the consumer. We were the first to do many of the methodologies within market research. But if, as a leader today, you have been hired because you know so much about research and you try to take the same principles that got you where you are and instill them today, you will not be able to do exponential innovation. The reality is that if we are waiting for consumers to tell you what the next innovation is, of course, you're never going to get that answer. You've got to be able to see it. You've got to be able to observe it. You've got to be able to sit with consumers. You've got to be able to not just work with consumers and do design thinking, although I believe in design thinking, but I also can do design thinking and invent a flyable car, but I'm not going to buy it right now. And so the reality is that you've got to be able to work with the consumers and develop your products. You've got to be able to go out and observe them. You've got to be able to have a validation process that allows you to test the value of your ideas. And that means changing your research to really be able to learn quick, learn fast, learn cheap, but more importantly, to be able to validate how you do research today, which means going into wherever you are, whether it's a service or a product, and being able to see if consumers will actually put hard cash into what they have just co-created with you or what you've created. If you're not going that final step in today's world with innovation to see if people will actually put value behind what it is that you have created, then your research is no longer done. You will work very hard, you will come up with great innovation, but in the end, the likelihood that people will buy it, you'll grow and drive value is very minimal. And so I just will say to ensure that as a leader, you aren't just teaching the same old principles we have around research, but you're demanding that your teams show it to you, see it to you, you see the validation, you understand it, that you are experimenting, that you create an environment that you can experiment, and that you continue to drive that experimentation. Us as leaders have to create that environment and demand it, because if we ask to see the same old research tools or methods or purchase intent that we've always seen, we won't necessarily get the results that you need for exponential innovation. The next one, sorry, in that picture that I just, as an example, is a very, very clear picture. This is like a real example of healthy food, working for a healthy food company. The things people tell me that they're going to do and buy is extraordinary. But if you sit with them all day and see them at 3 o'clock, this is pretty much what life looks like. It is typically not an organic, wonderful, healthy food drink. And so making sure that you actually validate what you think you're inventing is critical. So that's where that example came from. Third one is one that we've talked a lot about as a group, and that's productive failure. I think it's really easy to talk about productive failure. We all know how important it is. We all know if you're not failing, you're not learning, and we could go on and talk about that forever. But the reality is, what is it that we as leaders have to do in order to create an environment where people can productively fail? And I would say it's two things. One, I know that Miguel Alumni, who was my coach from an R&D standpoint, had taught me working on Pampers many years ago, and that is that you can't create an environment of fear. If you as a leader create an environment where you are instilling fear in your organization, then no matter what you say about it's okay to fail fast, I fail too, it will not work. And so really making sure that you are not doing anything to instill fear in your organization is critical. The second thing is really about permission and how many of us really create the permission to fail. It is a different behavior to talk about it and a different behavior to give permission, to promote somebody publicly who has actually failed, to be able to talk about your own failure, to be able to give examples of that and celebrate the failure as it happens. And so productive failure, obvious. But as a leader, what are things that we're doing to instill that we actually believe in it, that when people fail, we actually have a meeting about the failure, not to shame them, but to talk about what we can take from that failure and be able to learn from it and celebrate the fact that they learned fast, ideally cheap, ideally quick, and ideally that failure and learnings was used throughout the organization is critical. Whether you're putting that in your next town hall or your intranet or whatnot, it's critically important that we actually have behaviors as leaders around that to ensure that productive failure is something that's in the lifeblood of our organizations. The next one is really around, as leaders, when it comes to innovation, how many of us are still doing mentorship and have not evolved to coaching? And hopefully you know the difference, but I think if not, it's really important that we do understand the difference. Especially for those of, I think probably maybe everyone in this room, how many of you have had this discussion where someone says, congratulations, you've gotten a job. I'm so happy to have somebody who used to work at Procter & Gamble. If you could just come and make sure you help build all of our capabilities and you are going to own innovation, you might think that they're hiring you just for that reason. And you'll find yourself on stage one day talking about how we used to do it at Procter & Gamble was, or when I used to work on this brand was. And what you're doing is you're mentoring. You're just telling them about the good old days like this picture. And that does not breed any innovation, especially in an organization that needs to learn it themselves. And so we all have to watch out from doing this. And mentorship has its right place and time, and of course I believe in mentorship. But when you're trying to deliver something exponentially new and different to the world, telling people how you used to do it or why it failed in 1992 is of no use or help. There is a way to be able to evolve to coaching, which means you actually might know what works and may not work, but telling your team creates an environment where, like the Matrix, you've created yourself as this big oracle that knows all things and doesn't give people the opportunity to learn it themselves. In fact, they're just going to sit there at your knee and expect you to give them the ideas for innovation. You've got to move to this example of coaching. You've got to be able to meet your team where they are at and take them where you want them to go. You've got to be able to behave in a way that really ensures that your team is not just learning from you, but you have created an environment that you are learning from your team. And so I'd say just making sure that all of us know the difference between mentorship and coaching and practice really strong coaching principles as a leader is critically important to driving innovation. It may sound soft, it may sound ethereal, but at the end of the day, coaching is one of the most important skills to be able to ensure that your team can deliver and give you the ideas of the future. The next one is also very, I think, pragmatic, but it has to do with questioning. And I think this notion of our addiction to being right is very dangerous for innovation. I can give a million examples, but it is really very well if you're on the executive team, as I sit on the executive team, and your team comes in with their innovation and they've been working on it for months or in some cases years, and you automatically listen to one presentation and tell them why that's not going to work. You kind of expound out your being right. They either align with what you thought was going to work or they didn't, which typically means success and failure of the poor innovation team that just came to you. Then you're in a very dangerous place, because it just takes one of those meetings where you act like you know right from wrong for the entire morale of your organization to die. As opposed to sitting and asking questions and making sure that no matter who presents to you innovation, you are creating an environment where you are asking questions, forcing yourself to ask questions even if you think you know the answers. The behavior is the difference between having innovation, having exponential innovation, having things that have never been brought to your organization, and having people just espouse to you the things and the pet projects that they know that you actually like and support. And so I just would encourage you to make sure that you are asking questions. Once again, it sounds simple, but you'd be surprised if you look at your week or your month, how many questions have you actually asked your teams, as opposed to how many speeches have you actually given them. This next one is very, very sophisticated. So let me just ask you, what do all of these have in common? Does anyone know? They're what? They're songs. They definitely are songs. One-hit wonders, okay? You guys might have heard these songs. Ice, Ice, Baby. I'm Too Sexy for My, I don't know, whatever it is. Or Who Let the Dogs Out. Most of us actually know these songs no matter what culture we're from, because they made it globally. But these singers, unfortunately, never produced another song. They are all one-hit wonders. And I would say that as leaders for exponential innovation, it's critically important that we do not encourage our teams to be one-hit wonders. And I'm not sure if any of you have ever done this, but you've told your team, I just want to have, I want a big innovation. I want it to be amazing. I need a new innovation in a couple of months. If you could do something like the iPhone, that would just be amazing. I mean, it sounds crazy, but we as leaders actually say these things. We make it sound like there's a one-hit wonder that can happen. There's one thing that could happen to change our numbers, to turn around our business, to drive the consumers back, to change the share. We have to ensure that as leaders, we are not expounding the thinking and the thought that there's one hit wonder that's going to save our business. We have to embrace the behavior of a venture capital and embrace the portfolio approach. We have to make sure that our teams, from a leadership standpoint, understand that we are open to creating a portfolio of ideas, a portfolio of innovations, knowing that many are going to fail, that we're okay with that, and don't put the pressure on your team to develop that one innovation. Because from that one innovation, and let alone if you do like many people have done, and tell them that there has to be one ROI, they have to deliver one sales amount in revenue by year one, it paralyzes the entire team. And so I think some of you guys have lived that. I hear some amens over there in that corner. But I would just say ensuring that you embrace the portfolio approach as a leader is key. There's a statistic out there by VCs, and I recently talked to a leader that's supporting P&G, that if you're with a VC, I believe it's like 60% of all of the revenue that comes from the generation of a VC comes from just 6% of the capital that's deployed. That is enormous, right? So we know that VCs are designed to fail, but we as leaders have to create a portfolio to be able to ensure that we have our teams understand that we're open to a portfolio approach. The next one is around success theater, and that has to do with ensuring that we are not giving Academy Awards in our organization, because all that it promotes is actors. So that is to say, I don't know how many of us have been developing and know how to do the presentation, the pitch, to have our data and our numbers aligned. If our teams know that that's what that we love and that we celebrate, then they will do nothing more than present to us what we want to hear. So it's ensuring that we do not just create an environment where people come to us with perfection, that they are such great actors and that we're rewarding the best presentations, but we actually are rewarding people to come and tell us the truth, that we reward people who are truth tellers, that we ensure that people who tell us how they succeeded and failed are celebrated. This is critically important, because I do think that as leaders we tend to promote this sort of theater and beautiful presentation recommendations and people telling us all the most positive things, and of course, we know where that leads. So just ensure that you're not giving out Academy Awards as a leader. And I think the last one from a more leadership standpoint has to do with this notion of being ambidextrous. While we're talking about innovation and we're talking about it like, so many of us own innovation and that's all that we do, I doubt that very few of us who are on the stage today actually just own innovation, right? We all know that one person can't own innovation, or organizations have to own innovation, and many of us have multiple jobs. My responsibilities would include being a chief marketing officer, having innovation, having R&D, having quality, having sustainability for the company. Innovation is just one of the things that are on my plate. And if I think that I have the luxury of just thinking about innovation all day and every day, I would be wrong. I have to be completely ambidextrous. On one moment, I'm talking about how there's zero failure rate in a quality standpoint and how we have to be perfect. And on the other hand, I'm encouraging people to fail and experiment and drive crazy ideas and go outside and create a world that isn't there. And the idea that we have to be ambidextrous is critical because some of us grew up in a world where there were people who did innovation and there were people who managed their current business. The world is gone. Most of us have to be able to do both. And so building the systems in your organization to be able to do both is critical. And then just two things that I think are important that we don't have time to talk about today, but that has to do with leadership, of course, is just one element of creating the environment for innovation. The other one is making sure as a leader that you actually know what innovation capabilities are and that you are prioritizing those in your organization. Maybe we'll get into those during Q&A later, but there is a suite of innovation capabilities that you need. There's wonderful ranches and universities that you can go to, of course, around innovation, but one of the ones I wanted to mention today was around values. Most of us say we want exponential, breakthrough, amazing innovation, but the values of our company are actually not aligned to get the output that we want. And only as leaders, it's only us that have the mandate to change the values of an organization. And so if you haven't taken a moment to look at your values and make sure your values are aligned with the output you say you want from innovation, then you're never going to achieve that objective. So I don't want to overlook the fact that many of the greatest companies who have the output of innovation have actually changed their values to make sure that they're rewarding the behaviors that they say they want. And the last thing is really around the operations system. As many of you know who have driven exponential innovation, you can do it, you can be a great leader, you can have great values, you can have great capabilities, but if your whole organizational system and operating system is still old and still tied to sustainability and just efficiency and just an ROI that you have to deliver within 3 months or pay to play in 1 or 2 years, then it's not going to work. So you have to be able to take the time to either change your operating system, work with an expert to update your operating system as an organization to drive innovation, but it's a critical element that you must do. And you don't have to do it all on day one, but you do as a leadership team and ideally with your executive board, really think about how do you get to your operating system 2.0. And this is what I wanted to just share that Procter & Gamble has done so well to evolve the P&G way to update their growth model, to be a growth model 2.0, which has changed the way of working. And so I just will say that those are the examples that I wanted to give as far as what are some of the things that we as leaders can do to instill innovation. And I wanted to, as I try to always do, give a support to someone who I think is doing this work really well. And I wanted to recommend a book to you, which is called New to Big, and it's by a guy named David Kinder. I've got no affiliation, but a commercial, because he's been one of the partners with Procter & Gamble and has worked really closely with David Taylor recently. And I think the work that he's done has been incredible to continue to get P&G back to the innovation that we know that they have. And since we want the company to succeed, I wanted to support the partners that have supported our legacy. So thank you very much.